So I'm Mike Richmond. I'm the Executive Director of the Open Interconnect Consortium. And I guess I would start kind of where you left off when you said that OIC is the standard for IoT. And I would just observe that God must love standards. That's why he made so many. Because here I am, and we're another, standards development organization. In some ways, I'm a visitor from another planet. The world I come from is, the computer world, the software world. I'm a software engineer by trade. And yet, what you guys do is very, very familiar to me. 30 years ago, I was flogging multi-bus and RMX 86 and things that are probably still running in a lot of the plants out there. This is actually stuff that was just before the PC. Anybody ever hear of that stuff? No? Okay, just a couple of hands. So, I remember, and the thing I loved about that job was feeling that every time I talked to a customer, it was like opening a page of Scientific American or Popular Mechanics. I just learned something every day because what you do is just so absolutely amazing. Okay, let me talk a little bit about what OIC does. So we're about secure and reliable device discovery and connectivity across multiple operating systems, platforms, technologies, as a foundational capability to enable the Internet of Things. So when I say foundational, I mean we are supplying your supplier's supplier, right? I try to count the number of steps. So we have companies that would sell to GE. GE is actually on our board of directors, but that's the GE digital side. So, the GE business units would get stuff from GE digital. We are trying to consolidate around a common interoperable standard that goes across vertical markets, which is one of the reasons I'm here. So we're actually supplying the guts of the internet-connected refrigerator, right? So I stood next to a $2,500 Samsung refrigerator in a suite at CES that had an OIC logo on it. And I don't know whether you want to buy that refrigerator or not, but I can tell you they're definitely making it. Now, what are we doing? We're like any other standards development organization. We're delivering an industry standard spec and a certification program. But where we differ a little bit from some groups is we also sponsor an open source project where the code is available under an Apache 2.0 license, so it's free. And that implementation is a reference implementation of our architecture. So in some ways, this is a little bit like how the web gets standardized, where you have the W3C that standardizes the format for web pages, and then you have browser vendors doing implementations. The web doesn't get standardized without an implementation in hand, because it helps kind of a reality check. So we're doing the two things in parallel, okay? And then the other thing that we're doing is, we already know. We started up about a year and a half ago, and even back then, there were already more IoT standardization efforts than I could, get my head around. And there will not be one ring to rule them all. Okay, there just can't be. There are so many vertical market specific requirements. There's so many geographically, in some cases, governmental sponsored activities. There isn't going to be one. But if we can work together and do our best to bridge from one to the other, then people can actually deploy things. And that's one of the things that we're very active in trying to do, as well as I'm sure the other organizations that are out there. And then the last thing that we're about is we're very, very focused on IPR. When a lot of us started in business, patents were something that applied to hardware. And then about 20 years ago, the Supreme Court said you could start patenting software. And it took a while for people to understand what that meant. And then about 10 or 15 years, about 10 years ago, open source software came in. And with open source software, you can copy the software for free. Sometimes you have to give the changes back, but in the case of Apache, you don't. You can just use it. You don't have to, if you want to modify it, you don't have to give your changes back. But there are patent implications for open source licenses as well. And this has become a very, very complicated topic. Okay? And there are companies in the computer industry that are just eager to give away stuff that people will put in products so they can come behind 5 years later and start charging a patent royalty. And it's an potential IP minefield. So we're very focused on having very clean IPR policies that ensure that what we produce is royalty-free, not just fair and reasonable, but actually royalty-free. So that's kind of what we're about from a big vision point of view. Our board of directors includes Intel, Cisco, Cable Labs, Samsung, GE Software, and Aris, the set-top box manufacturer, and Cable Labs. So you can see kind of a consumer on the one hand, industrially on the other hand, right? So we're kind of, going both ways. Our platinum members, Atmel is a big supplier of componentry to a lot of the devices you're likely to be using. Honeywell, MediaTek, ZTE, so IBM. So you see, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have a total of 155 members, and I'm not going to show you all the slides with all the logos. I just wanted to give you a sample here. And then what I also want to show you, these are the groups that we are presently talking to where we have liaison agreements. And a liaison agreement is basically we've signed mutual NDAs so we can talk about specs that are still in process. And some of these are, things that are actually, industrial. And what we do is we say, well, here's how we do it, here's how you do it. And, well, we haven't done that yet, maybe we'll do it the way you do it. And those are the conversations we have. Because the engineers, they're not trying to make this stuff different in a lot of cases. They just don't know what everybody else is doing. I mean, it'd be a full-time job, maybe 2 full-time jobs to keep track. So that's how we're approaching it. Okay, so we sit above the level of the radio, or physical transport. So we don't care whether you're doing 802.3, Ethernet, or 802.11, Wi-fi, or 6LoWPAN, or Zigbee, or Thread, or any of these other things. We're strictly software. Okay? And so if you want to interoperate between 2 networks that have our software on it, you have to have some box that has both physical networking things in the same box and some kind of with a bridge, right, that allows things to go between one and the other, but then the software protocols that run on top don't care. We worry about security, identity, permissions as a base level, and we start with this device discovery. Hi, where are you? Who are you? Are you a light bulb? Gee, that's nice to know. Can you go on, off? Can you change color? Things like that. We have data transmission protocols and ways of describing devices. And when you click down 3 levels in any of these specs, you're going to find everybody's doing XML or everybody's using JSON. And if they're not doing one, you can translate to the other. It's actually just a little bit of work, but it's not impossible. And then that's where we stop. Now we try to get requirements from all these different vertical markets. We started with smart home. We've got a lot of work going on now in starting with health fitness and also industrial. We haven't done too much yet with automotive, but there's some interest. So that's kind of where we work conceptually. Now our open source project is where we actually are most active in bridging to the legacy systems, right, which is the topic today, right? So when you write a spec, you don't say, here's how you talk to all these different legacy things. You can't do that in the spec. The spec is standalone, we pretend we're one ring to rule them all. But in the implementation, you can do something that's a lot more open-ended. And the way we do this is by having something that we call a plugin architecture. So this is a software plugin. Now, if you're familiar with device drivers and how they work in an operating system, right? The operating system can't know about every single device, but you can go to a manufacturer and say, hey, if you write a device driver to this particular spec, then my OS can talk to that device. A plug-in architecture for something like what we do is analogous to that. And it's interesting in the open source world that efforts which on their own would not seem to have a lot of traction end up with a lot of traction because they end up with a big bunch of plugins. And if anybody here like really hardcore IT? No hardcore IT people? Okay. There are a couple of, okay. The most popular open source project in the world is a project called Node.js, which is a way of writing JavaScript to talk to backend databases, okay? And to other things that are on servers. Node.js has thousands of plugins that people have written for various backend applications. And that's why it's the most popular. So the network effect of, oh, I can get a plugin, I don't have to write it, right? So even if there was a better language to write something in than JavaScript, which a lot of software people will tell you there is always a better language to write stuff in besides JavaScript, they'll grab this platform because of all the plugins. And so we believe that we can create an ecosystem of these plugins for backward compatibility to all these things. Because, you know, our open source implementation starts by running on Linux, that's where we start, but it's also portable to a bunch of other operating systems. It's also possible to drive it down to very low footprint devices. So that's our approach. Okay, now I think I mentioned that we are here and interested in learning what the requirements are for adapting what we are doing to what your needs are. And so we have teamed up with ARC to do a very simple survey, and we'd like your help in getting us some data. And we don't expect something for nothing. So if you are willing to help us with this survey, which has all this formal statement of all the things we're trying to get out of the survey, which I will not read to you because you can imagine what it is we're trying to do. I will just go directly to asking for the order, which is, please take our survey, and if you are one of 50 random survey respondents, you will get a $20 gift card, okay? And let's see, we have 50 people in the room. Boy, we might be pretty, I don't know, I can't guarantee you all get a gift card, but you have a pretty good shot. We do have some responses already, but you'd have a pretty good shot at the gift card. And what are we asking? We're asking, hey, what have you got that's connected for more than control? What are the top standards you're using today for control and for monitoring, for analytics? Your top criteria for choosing technologies, and what are your most valuable use cases? This is potentially one of the most important things we'd like to know. And what are the big obstacles? So we're reaching out. We're looking for information that can help us meet your needs better. Okay, how am I doing on time? This is in fact my last slide. All right. Yep. Except to say, please take our survey. All right.